Have you ever looked at your life and realized nothing makes sense anymore? You did everything you were told. Worked hard. Stayed kind. Tried to be good. And yet somehow, everything still fell apart. Maybe it's your finances. Maybe it's your health. Maybe it's just this heaviness that won't leave your chest. You wonder, where is God in all of this? You try to pray. But your voice feels too small. Your faith too thin. You think, maybe this is it. Maybe miracles don't happen to people like you. But what if I told you? The miracle doesn't start after your life changes. What if it starts the moment you say, God, thank you anyway. I don't even remember how I got up that morning. All I remember is waking up on the floor, not the bed. Back aching. Breath shallow. Another sleepless night spent drowning in panic. It was still dark. The lights were off. The only thing glowing was my phone, buried under a pile of loan documents, bills, and rejection letters. The screen kept flashing the same notification. Your account is overdrawn by $20,435. I laughed. A quiet, hollow laugh. The kind that slips out when something inside you breaks, and there's nothing left to protect. It wasn't the number that crushed me. It was the realization that I had no idea how to come back from this. I used to have a job. A plan. Confidence. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, things would turn out fine. I did everything right. Woke up at 6 a.m., worked 12 hours a day, never splurged, never partied. But life has this strange way of cornering you even when you do everything right. Illness. Accidents. A few wrong words from the wrong people. And suddenly, you're standing in the ashes of what used to be a future. Now I lived alone. Almost no one left to call. I used to pray. But after months of silence, it felt like I was talking to air. I remember whispering one night, God, if you're real, show me. Please. But there was nothing. No sign. No miracle. Just silence. So loud it made your chest hurt. And that silence kills faster than hunger ever could. One morning, I walked out of my apartment and just stood there. I didn't know where I was going. I just stood on the sidewalk, watching cars pass. And for a moment, I wondered what it would feel like if one didn't stop. No, I'm not saying I wanted to die. I just didn't know what I was still living for. That's when I saw her. An elderly homeless woman. Ragged clothes, wisps of white hair tangled like thread. She was sitting with her eyes closed, cradling a small, torn book like it was treasure. I moved closer. It was a Bible. Worn, edges curled, cover nearly falling apart. She didn't beg. Didn't complain. She just opened her eyes and looked at me with this still, deep stare. And said one sentence. Start your day thanking God. I froze. She smiled, softly, and closed her eyes again. I don't know why, but those words, so simple, so misplaced in that moment, hit me like a whisper from somewhere I'd forgotten. Start your day thanking God. Me? Thank God. For what? I didn't know. But the next morning, I tried. I sat up early, still aching, still lost. And I whispered. God, thank you for keeping me alive through the night. That's all. Nothing more. No begging. No bargaining. And somehow, my chest felt a little lighter. Then I added. God, let me see the depth of your unchanging love. There was no booming voice from heaven. But there also wasn't the screaming panic I'd grown used to inside my head. Just quiet. A strange, unfamiliar stillness. So I made a decision. Just 7 days. I'd do this every morning, just for a week. No expectations. No conditions. Just a thread of faith. Because if that thread was all I had left, I wasn't going to let go of it. What I didn't know was that by day 3, my phone would ring. That by day 5, someone who disappeared years ago would come back. And by the 7th day, something unexplainable would happen. No. I'm not telling you what it was. Not yet. Because before you see what changed in my life, you need to understand what changed in me. And that didn't begin with money. It began with something far quieter, far stranger, and far more powerful. A single morning when I looked in the mirror and didn't see someone who had failed. I saw someone who was learning to stand. One morning at a time. The first morning felt strange. There was no music. No light bursting through the windows. Just silence. But not the kind that screamed at me. This one was softer. I sat at the edge of my bed, knees trembling. Still broke. Still scared. Still unsure. But I whispered again. God, thank you for today. Even if I don't know why I'm still here. My voice cracked halfway through. Not from pain. But because for the first time in a while, the words felt real. I didn't expect anything to change. I just wanted to remember what it felt like to speak honestly again. And honesty. That's where things started to shift. That morning, I didn't check my bank app. I didn't spiral into the usual cycle of shame. I just sat there. And breathed. By noon, I opened my inbox. Mostly junk. A few final notice emails. And then, something unexpected. A message from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. No subject line. Just one sentence inside. I don't know why, but I thought about you today. Hope you're okay. I stared at it. I wasn't okay. But for some reason, that message felt like oxygen. I didn't reply. I didn't even cry. I just closed the laptop and whispered. Thank you for reminding me I'm not invisible. I started writing things down. Not dreams. Not goals. Just prayers. In a notebook I hadn't touched in months. Small ones. Clumsy ones. God, help me see the good that's still here. God, let me hear you in the quiet. God, I can't carry this. Please, carry me. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was just trying to stay alive. And each word I wrote felt like one tiny stone laid down on a path I didn't yet understand. By the second morning, something shifted again. Not outside. Not in my circumstances. But inside. I woke up before the alarm. No panic. No dread. I sat up, looked around my dim apartment, the chipped paint, the unpaid bills taped to the fridge. Still real. Still there. But the weight didn't crush me. I whispered. Thank you for another chance. I started doing something else. Right after praying, I made coffee and opened the window. Just to feel the morning air. I hadn't done that in weeks. There was something about it, this simple act of facing the light, that made me feel a little less buried. The world didn't stop spinning for me. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid to be in it. Later that afternoon, I got a call. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something told me to answer. It was a woman. Her voice calm. Familiar, somehow. Is this, the number still connected to Elijah Moore? Yes, this is Elijah. I used to be your client. A long time ago. You probably don't remember me. But I remembered you. I kept your card all this time. My hand started shaking. I have a friend looking for someone reliable. Someone who listens. I thought of you. She didn't know I was on the verge of eviction. She didn't know I hadn't had work in over 5 months. But she offered to connect me. Said it was something small, just a few hours. Consulting. I said yes. Not because I thought it would solve anything. But because it was the first door that had cracked open in what felt like 1,000 years. That night, I sat on the floor again. Same spot. Same worn-out hoodie. Same uncertainty. But I whispered. Thank you for the flicker. Even if it's not fire yet. And then I cried. Not the broken kind. But the kind that washes something clean. It wasn't hope, not fully. But it was the start of remembering what hope used to feel like. By the third morning, I found myself waking up before the sun. Not because I had to. But because I wanted to. It surprised me too. The silence no longer felt like an enemy. It was starting to feel like a blanket, thin, fragile, but covering something raw and real underneath. I whispered again, eyes still closed. Thank you, God, for not giving up on me, even when I did. The ritual was simple. No candles. No mantras. Just honesty. Each word I said wasn't rehearsed. It spilled out like breath held too long. And every time, I ended with the same quiet sentence. Let me see you in what's left. Because I had lost a lot. Money. Pride. Friendships. Belief in myself. But something in me was starting to wonder, what if the miracle didn't show up after the pain left? What if it was buried inside it? That same morning, I walked outside with no destination. Just, moving. The air was cold. Crisp. The kind that bites but wakes you up at the same time. A man passed me on the sidewalk, early 40s, coffee in hand, Bluetooth in ear. He looked exhausted. But kind. He gave me a nod. Something about it felt sacred. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just human. And for some reason, I whispered in my heart. Thank you for this moment. Even this one. I didn't have a job yet. My account was still bleeding red. But I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Stillness. That afternoon, I opened the notebook again. Not to pray this time. Just to read what I had written. Page after page of shaky handwriting. Misspelled words. Tear stains. And in the middle of it all, a single line circled twice. God, remind me that I'm not forgotten. I didn't remember writing that. But I knew I meant it when I did. Right then, my phone buzzed. It was a message from a number I didn't recognize. Hey, this is Micah. I know it's random, but I'm in town for a few days. Would love to catch up. Micah. We hadn't spoken in 6 years. He was a friend from a former life, the version of me that had dreams, drive, and way too much caffeine. He had seen me rise. But not fall. And suddenly, there he was. Out of nowhere. I hesitated before replying. Because when you're in pain for that long, even kindness can feel suspicious. But something told me to say yes. We met at a small diner. The kind with chipped mugs and waitresses who call you Han. He looked older. Softer. He didn't ask about the money. Or the job. Or the weight I'd lost. He just said, man. I've missed your voice. And I almost lost it right there. Because no one had said that to me in years. For the next hour, we talked. Laughed. Sat in long, comfortable silences. Before he left, he paused and looked at me like he was measuring something invisible. Then he said, I don't know what you're going through. But I know this, God's not done with you. Not even close. He said it like a fact. Not a guess. I nodded. Didn't cry. Didn't explain. I just walked home in the cold, whispering over and over under my breath. God, you remembered me. That night, I didn't sleep on the floor. I got into bed. Not because things were fixed, but because I didn't feel like I needed to punish myself anymore. Before I closed my eyes, I whispered one more time. Thank you for today. Thank you for the ache. Thank you for the echo that doesn't sound empty anymore. And as I drifted off, I felt something small. Faint. But unmistakable. The feeling that something was coming. Not from the world. But from within me. The fourth morning was darker than the rest. The sky outside held no color. Just a heavy gray, pressing down like it knew I still had debts to pay. I almost didn't pray. Almost. But something in me refused to stay silent. So I whispered anyway. Thank you for today, even if I feel nothing. Let me trust you, even when I can't feel you. It felt hollow at first. But it was still real. That's the thing no one tells you about faith. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sounds like a whisper that barely makes it past your lips. But God hears it just the same. I made my coffee slowly. Sat by the window again. Watched nothing happen. And yet, something inside me was shifting. Like the pieces hadn't moved yet, but they were finally willing to. Around noon, I got a notification. My bank. I felt that old weight in my chest, shame, dread, the kind of fear that tastes metallic. I opened it anyway. Still negative. But not by as much. There was a deposit. $217.39. From a name I didn't recognize. For a moment, I thought it was a mistake. But the note said, for the advice you gave me 4 years ago. It changed everything. I never forgot. 4 years ago. I couldn't even remember who it was. But someone had. Someone remembered when I still had light to give. I sat there, phone in my hand, trying to breathe. It wasn't the money. It was the reminder. That even in seasons of drought, seeds planted long ago still grow. Even when you forget them. I whispered again, but this time through a cracked voice. God, thank you for what I didn't know was coming. The next few hours were quiet. No calls. No more emails. Just the sound of the radiator hissing and a clock ticking too loud on the wall. But I started to notice something. The stillness wasn't empty anymore. It was full. Full of space I had never given myself. Full of breaths I hadn't noticed I was holding. I opened the notebook again and didn't write a prayer. I wrote a name. Mine. Just that. Just, Elijah. Like I was trying to remember who that was. And maybe forgive him a little. Later that day, I walked into the corner store. Just to get out. Maybe buy toothpaste. The woman at the register smiled and said, "You look different today." I froze. "What do you mean?" She shrugged. "I don't know. Just, lighter." It stunned me. Because I hadn't said a word. But maybe that's what happens when something invisible begins to shift inside you. Other people feel it before you do. I walked home slower. Let the cold bite a little. Let the world be loud around me and didn't flinch. When I got back, I saw it. A letter. Real paper. No barcode. Just my name, written in blue ink. No return address. I opened it carefully. Inside was one sentence. "You have no idea how much you're still needed." No signature. No clue who sent it. I held the paper like it might vanish. I didn't need to know who wrote it. Because I knew who sent it. I sat down on the edge of my bed, letter in my lap, and for the first time in a long time. I didn't have to try so hard to believe. The faith didn't come in a flood. It came like a quiet nod. A whisper in the bones. And I whispered back. Thank you for chasing me into the silence. Because maybe this quiet unraveling wasn't a breakdown. Maybe it was a becoming. By the fifth morning, I didn't have to force it anymore. The ritual came naturally. Feet to the floor. Hands still. Heart open, even if only by a crack. I whispered. God, let me not miss what you're doing just because it doesn't look like what I asked for. The world outside hadn't changed. Bills still existed. I still had no job title to put on a form. Still no miracle check waiting in the mailbox. But something inside me had changed. I was starting to listen. Not to the noise of the world. But to the small voice I'd spent years drowning out. The one that said, "You were never worthless. You were just tired." I walked again that afternoon, hands in my pockets, head bowed more from habit than shame. There was a church down the block, one I had passed 100 times but never gone inside. I used to call it a crutch. Now, it looked like a place to breathe. I pushed the door open. Empty pews. Dust in the air. Candles flickering in silence like they knew things I didn't. I sat in the back row. Didn't kneel. Didn't speak. Just sat. For a long time. Then slowly, quietly, almost without permission, I whispered. I don't know how to come back. And somehow, in that moment, I felt like I didn't need to. Because maybe God wasn't waiting for me to come back. Maybe He had been walking with me the whole time. Even when I ran. Even when I cursed. Even when I called the silence abandonment. Maybe the silence was just Him waiting for me to slow down. I left the church not with answers. But with a strange peace. And that night, as I walked through my front door, my phone rang. It was my old manager. We hadn't spoken in over a year. He said, "Listen, I know this is out of nowhere, but one of our clients asked about you. They liked your writing. I didn't even know you still did that." I didn't. At least not professionally. But I'd been writing in that notebook every day for 5 days straight. He continued, "They want someone to do a short-form devotional series. Nothing huge. But it pays. You'd be great." I stood in the doorway, stunned. He couldn't have known what I'd been doing. Couldn't have known I was writing prayers in the dark, not pitch decks or polished lines. I said yes. Hung up the phone. And laughed. Not because the money was enough to save me. But because it was the first time in months that something felt aligned. Like heaven had taken a step toward me the moment I dared to whisper into it. Later that night, I flipped to a fresh page in the notebook. No prayer this time. Just this. When I started thanking God, I didn't get riches. I got reminders. And maybe, that's richer than I knew. I sat back. Let the quiet settle around me like a friend. Because maybe faith doesn't fix everything. But it does something deeper. It rewrites how we hold the broken parts. And in that stillness, I closed my eyes and whispered once more. God, let me not forget you when things start to get better. Because deep down, I knew something was coming. And this time, I didn't feel afraid of it. The sixth morning began with rain tapping the window like an old friend checking in. I didn't rush out of bed. Didn't scroll. Didn't rehearse the worry. I just listened. For the first time in weeks, I didn't wake up thinking about the overdraft notice. Or the number in my bank account. Or whether I was falling behind some invisible finish line. Instead, I whispered. God, thank you for teaching me how to breathe again. Because that's what it felt like. Like I'd been underwater for years, and now I was learning to use my lungs again. I made my coffee slower that morning. Let the warmth sit in my palms. Watched the rain smear the skyline into something soft and new. Then I opened the laptop. The writing assignment had landed in my inbox overnight. 10 short devotionals. Deadline, 1 week. And there was this line in the client's message. Speak to the weary. We want hope that sounds like it's been through something. I stared at those words for a long time. Hope that sounds like it's been through something. Maybe that was me now. I used to think hope had to sound polished. Loud. Perfect. Now I knew better. Hope sometimes sounds like gravel in your throat. Like a voice that's cracked but still singing. I started to write. Not perfectly. But honestly. One by one, the prayers poured out. Simple. Raw. Start your day thanking God. God, let me see the depth of your unchanging love. Teach me to trust the silence, not fear it. Every sentence felt like a piece of the climb. Not the top of the mountain, just proof I hadn't stopped moving. By noon, I'd written 4. And not because I was trying to impress anyone. But because I had things to say now. Not about theology. About survival. And grace. And mornings when your chest is tight but your spirit still whispers, just one more step. I didn't check the balance that day. Didn't count how much time I had left to pay rent. Because something in me was beginning to believe. I wasn't running out. I was being refilled. That afternoon, I got an email from a stranger. She said she had found one of my old blog posts, something I forgot I even wrote. She said it helped her stop crying at work. She said, "You don't know me, but your words made me feel less invisible today." I stared at the screen, hands trembling. Because that blog post? I wrote it 3 years ago. Alone. In a room I couldn't afford. Crying into a keyboard, begging God for a sign. And now it was being sent back to me as one. Full circle. Like God saying, "I never wasted a word you spoke in pain." That night, I couldn't sleep. But I wasn't anxious. I was expectant. Not because I had proof. But because I had peace. Like somehow, deep in the marrow of all this mess, something sacred was rebuilding me. And I realized, miracles don't always crash in like thunder. Sometimes they arrive as a quiet morning when you don't hate yourself. As a small check from a stranger. As a reminder that your voice still matters. I sat up, looked out the window. The rain had stopped. And I whispered one more time. God. I'm listening. That's all. No begging. No instructions. Just an open heart in the stillness. And for the first time in what felt like forever. The silence didn't scare me. It felt holy. On the 7th morning, I didn't wake up in panic. No thunderclap of anxiety. No fight or flight squeezing my chest before I even sat up. Just breath. And stillness. I laid there for a while, staring at the ceiling. Not thinking about what I lacked. But about what remained. Then, without ceremony, I reached for the notebook one last time. The cover was bent now. Pages soft at the edges. Ink smudged from a few tears I hadn't meant to leave behind. I flipped to a fresh page. And for a long moment, I didn't write anything. Just held the pen. Like it might understand me better than I understood myself. Finally, I whispered, not even sure who I was speaking to anymore. God. I thought the miracle would be money. But the miracle was that I stopped feeling worthless. I set the pen down. Because that truth didn't need to be written to be real. The money had come, yes, enough to breathe again. Enough to put groceries in the fridge, gas in the car. But that wasn't the miracle. The miracle was the ritual. The slow return to myself. The quiet mornings where I met a God who didn't scold me for being broken. Just waited patiently until I was ready to be held. And here's the twist no one tells you. When your soul heals, your life starts to respond. In strange, unpredictable ways. Like people showing up. Opportunities knocking. Your own voice no longer trembling when you speak your truth. I got a call that evening. Same manager. Same calm tone. He said, "Hey, that client. They passed your writing around. Someone else wants to hire you. A book project. Nothing huge, but it's real work." I said yes. Hung up. Didn't cry this time. Just smiled. Softly. Like someone who already knew they were going to be okay. Not because of a job. Or a check. But because something sacred had survived in me. I stood at the window as the light faded from the sky. The same street. Same broken sidewalk. Same mailbox that never held enough. But somehow, it all looked different. And maybe that's what happens when you thank God long enough. You don't just get things. You get vision. You stop seeing your life as a series of failures. And start seeing it as a field still growing. I whispered one last prayer that night. Not because I needed something. But because I wanted him to know. God, I didn't expect you to come so quietly. But thank you for never leaving, even when I did. I turned off the light. Closed the notebook. And for the first time in months, I slept. Deep. Whole. And when I woke up the next morning, I didn't feel like I was starting over. I felt like I was finally starting.